The number one area of my life that I can give credit to regarding the success of my relationships, thank God, has been in the area of vulnerability. Vulnerability is one of those topics that I don't know for the reason people don't talk about. People get freaked out when they hear the word vulnerable. And I can really pinpoint it to that one word that has helped me within my relationships, both on a personal and professional level. And there's so much depth that goes into this idea of vulnerability. And if we could start to embrace our own vulnerability, and this isn't like one of those fluffiness, like you need to tell everybody what's going on and this and that, like we're not practical skills, like how we can actually get into it and give some examples about what it is we can start to do. I'm telling you, our lives will be so much more free. We're going to be able to open ourselves up so much more, and we're going to be able to experience so much in our own personal lives. Because when it comes to vulnerability, the way that I like to look at it, and I don't know like what the definition is, but the way that I focus on it, because a lot of times everybody has their own definition about what vulnerability really means, or really any word really means. But for me, vulnerability means being open and honest. And I think there are many different places that we can apply it. And we'll first talk about it within our own selves, because I think for so many people, they want to be able to be doing more. They want to be able to step into a lifestyle that they want to really be able to have, but yet they don't accept the fact about where they truly are. This is something that was a huge struggle for me for a long time, because there were places that I wanted to be and I wanted to be doing, and I would always get so frustrated about like why I wasn't already there. And what really happened was I wasn't being true and honest with myself. I wasn't allowing myself to be just who I was in the moment. And there was a little bit of authenticity that was missing over there. There was a little bit of self-esteem and self-confidence and self-worth that was missing over there. But I wasn't being vulnerable enough to say, hey, what's really happening here? Like behind everything, behind closed doors, like what is going on? And it was so difficult for myself to acknowledge what was going on with myself. It wasn't like I was telling the world, it wasn't like I was telling different people, but it was so difficult to allow myself to acknowledge the fact of where I was. And the only time you can start to grow is if you really know where you are. If you don't know where you are, how are you supposed to set sail in the direction that you want to be able to go in? And for so many people, they're not able to set sail because they're so confused. You're heading west, but guess what? You're already west, or like you're in the east or the north, and like you're just going the wrong way. And what we have to recognize is that we have to be able to acknowledge and own the fact of where we are, even if we don't like it. And most of the times we don't like it. When it comes to vulnerability, we're being vulnerable for a reason, because it feels uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. And it doesn't mean it's not something that we can and should be doing. And if we could start to say to ourselves, hey, let me take a step back. Let me acknowledge what is really going on here. That can start to be the huge area of our life that we can start to move forward and start to look to change. Because for so many people, they want to do things differently. They want to change things up in their lives, whether it's personally, professionally, their relationships, their own health, their relationship with God, people, whatever it is. They want it to be different. And you have to acknowledge where you are in order to make that change. And you need to be open and honest. And if you're not able to do that, so you're not going to be able to get to the depths of it. I know for me personally, whenever I had certain coaching experiences, coaching sessions that I would go through, and the biggest aha moments I've ever had was when I was being the most honest with myself. And defensively, we all want to protect ourselves, and it makes sense. And we don't want to be open and honest. And I don't even know if it's so healthy to be open and honest like that 24/7. But to recognize that if we can get to a place and in a safe environment, and it could be with yourself, it could be with a coach, it could be with a spouse, whoever it is, but get yourself to a safe environment to allow yourself to say, hey, what is going on here? Who's it that I want to be? How can how can I strip it down to the bare bones to allow myself to become the person that I want, to acknowledge where I am, the good and the bad. And if we could start to do that, we could start to accept the fact, hey, you know what? Things need to change. I need to change. I need to do things differently. And that's going to be the thing that could start to transition us into the people that we want to become. We could start to roll into the role that we want. And only by doing that, only by starting out in the right area is it that we can actually start to do those things. And for so many people, they get so stuck. And for so many people, it's so difficult for them because they're scared. They're scared to look in the mirror. And rightfully so, because the more you deny it, the scarier it's going to be. And for so many of us, we want to deny the fact that certain things are true. I always tell the story about this guy I spoke to, and I asked him why he does what he does. Very successful. It's a company that's in multiple states, multiple teens, right? And he says he didn't know why. And he was so scared to ask that question. He paused, he reflected. We acknowledged the fact that he didn't know the answer, and he couldn't handle it. And I don't blame it, because in his mind he's thinking, oh my gosh, it was the last like 26, 30 years of my life a waste. I look at it as like, how can we give this last 26, 30 years some meaning? But for him, he's thinking, oh my gosh, I might have just wasted my last 26, 30 years. And the worst case scenario, even if he did, quote unquote, waste the last 20 to 26, 30 years, maybe he could start to change the next 26 to 30 years. Maybe he could move forward and say, hey, you know what? I really messed up then. Let me change something now to allow myself to step into the real version of myself. And that is something that is so powerful, that if we can start to get to know ourselves, it could be something that could start to make that shift to allow ourselves to become the people that we want to become. Another area that I found personally, and I mentioned this at the start, is in relationships. And this is something I totally give credit to my wife. I spoke about this in 2 of my YouTube videos already, about relationships, because I think it is so precious. And it's interesting. I heard a gentleman who speaks on relationships. He's I guess you'd call him an influencer if you have over 2 million followers, I guess so. And he actually said this tip, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like, this is literally what I do, and I know it works. I guess, I don't know, maybe my wife read it from a book or something, but it's so powerful. And the basic idea is that in relationships, there are going to be disagreements. And what we have to realize is that whether they're rational or not, whether the feelings that we have are rational or not, we have to be able to communicate with our partner, with our spouse. And if we're not able to communicate with them and to tell them, hey, you might have done something, or hey, I don't like how X, Y, and Z happened, or hey, I told you to do this 1,000,000 times, what's going on? So then what ends up happening is that there's this buildup of resentment. And I think this is where it all stems from. Like terrible relationships, I think it really stems from this. All the resentment that's built up over time and time again over these like silly small things, until all of a sudden there's a blow up. I told you 1,000,000 times this, that, and that. And then all of a sudden you just lay it all down. And then I told you again, and then you hold it in again, and there's like another blow up in every couple of weeks, couple of months. And then all of a sudden the relationship becomes, everyone hides their emotions, everybody hides their feelings, and then everyone has a massive blowout. And because nobody has to handle the blowout, everyone takes it personally. And therefore then you have a blowout. And then all of a sudden there's like go back and forth with this whole massive, like terrible relationship. And then you wonder why after like 10, 20 years, like the relationship is terrible. And the answer is because they never were able to communicate in the beginning, at the first place. And for so many people, that you have to realize that beginning, in the beginning, is when you have to start to become the most vulnerable. In the beginning, you have to be the place to allow yourself to open up. And it's the hardest, because especially in the beginning of a relationship, what ends up happening is that you don't really know the other person. And doesn't mean the first date you have to start opening up and being honest. Like, you want to get on a second date, come on. But to recognize that, hey, you know what? Maybe things are starting to get serious. Things are starting to get serious, but there's something that's bothering me about something that she does, or something that she might have said, or he said. Most likely he said, right? But if we can start to recognize that and start to say, hey, you know what? I have to open up here, because this is the area that is going to continue to grow us. And hopefully the person that you're with can respect you, and hopefully the person can hear you. More importantly, they don't have to respond, but they have to listen. And that is something that I know my wife has, thank God, has put into from the beginning of our relationship. It was the most awkward and toughest and uncomfortable of things to put in. But there's never this blowout, because we're always talking about things. And even if it's uncomfortable, I know that she's going to be able to listen. Or if she says something to me, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to be able to listen. And you have to start that out early on, because if you start doing that later on, if you don't have the assistance of somebody, or both people are not on par, what ends up happening is people take it personally, and people think you're attacking them. And for so many people, it's not an attack. It's just hey, I really care about us, this thing is not going too well. How can we fix it? Even if you mean well, it's not going well for me. And I need you because you care about me and my feelings and how I feel. So do you mind helping me out here? Discuss it, explain it to me. If you could change it, maybe you can change it. But without that conversation, you're not going to be able to get to it. And my wife mentioned to me, which was amazing. She said, whenever we have to say something like this to the other person, and we know we're going to say something that might hurt the other person, but we're not doing it to hurt the other person. We're not coming out of here, I need to tell you, I got to put you in your place. This is coming from a place of, I want our relationships to work out. I'm struggling right now. I need your input and your insight, or just your ear. So what we do is we actually say to one another the words, I need to be vulnerable with you right now. Because the hardest thing that we can do is to open up ourselves, to allow ourselves to express ourselves to that other person. And that is something that has to shift. And if we can allow ourselves to give ourselves permission in this safe area to say, hey, I need to be vulnerable. I need to be open with you right now. And the other person's like, okay, I know where they're going with this. I just need to listen right now. I don't need to react. I'm not going to defend why I did anything, because that's the first thing we want to be doing. But how can I allow myself to start to say, what am I supposed to do? How can I start to see within my own world what this other person is going through? Because most of the time we're just clueless about it. Most of the time, maybe it was a joke. Maybe most of the time we just forgot. But if we can start to recognize that it's not an attack and it's coming from a place of care, it's coming from a place of, I want the best for us, that could be something that could shift it all. And I'm telling you, it is literally, I think the number one reason why, thank God my wife and I have a great marriage. It's because we're able to be open. Nothing builds up. We don't have the blowouts that people talk about. And if you can start to become vulnerable, the safety goes with business partners, because a big part of it is trust. And how is it you're going to trust the other person? Of course, it has to be the right person that you can trust, and you're not just going to be open to everybody. But if you really want to build a relationship, this is the building of a relationship. This is saying, hey, I need to tell you something that might hurt you, but I'm doing it for the sake of us. It's like, I'm going to a business partner. It's like, hey, you know what? I really think you're slacking, but I need to tell you this because I really want this thing to work out between us. And the other person has to say, you know what? I know, I acknowledge that, or I know I'm not slacking, but I'll try to make it, make it better. I'm sorry you feel that way. Because regardless of whether the person is right or wrong, the fact that they feel that way shows something. And that's what we have to work out. And that's what we have to start to shift. And if we can start to acknowledge that and just to be more vulnerable in those situations, that could be something that could literally change so much for our own personalities, in terms of our own personal growth, and also in terms of the relationships that we're looking to grow. And I think, it's similar to authenticity in a way. Authenticity, I think, is like the next step. I think vulnerability might be the first step. And we gotta maybe journal this out a little bit. But vulnerability is the idea of being able to get to the raw self, to allow yourself to become down to who it is that you really are. What is you're going through, accepting everything that's going on. And then the authenticity aspect is the action afterwards. What is it that you're going to be doing afterwards? And I think there is some relatability. I don't know to say yet that they're the same thing. But I really think that if we can start to work on ourselves to embrace the authenticity, the vulnerability, embrace the fact that, you know what, things are not going great, that could be the first step to change. And admitting to it and apologizing to yourself or to your spouse for it, that could be something that I'm telling you, it could be so life-changing. Because so many of us are going through such self-doubt. We're constantly beating ourselves up. We're constantly wanting to be somewhere where we're not, which is all normal. Right? Let's acknowledge the fact that it's normal and pat ourselves on the back that we're actually driven people, that we want to be doing more. We think we're capable of more. That's so much better than being the type of person who be like, I'm giving up, I'm done. I was recently talking to somebody about that. I'm like, they were saying how they were so down, but they were happy that they were down because it shows that they still want it and they still have that desire. And that is something that's really cool. That's a deep level. And I think if we could start to work on that and acknowledge that could be something that could start to shift it. So for so many of us, we have this availability, we have this possibility of moving forward, of allowing ourselves to see what it is that we want to be doing, to allow ourselves to move forward. That could be the thing that could start to shift it. And I'm telling you, if we could just get into the place, get the person to ask us the right questions, get ourselves into that raw, safe environment, that we can start to then acknowledge what it is we're doing, we could start to be vulnerable, start to open ourselves up to people. And like I said, it's not to everybody. It's somebody you have to be able to trust, somebody you want to be able to trust, and somebody you might have to explain to them, like, what is you're going to be doing? Because once you do that, that can be the thing that allows them to acknowledge it. They're not going to just react to what you're going to say. Like, guys love doing this. It's like a girl will come over to a guy, girl will like say something that her day and why it was so hard, and the guy will start just giving answers. Like classic, like guy 101. And it's like, no, dude, like you're not supposed to give answers. You're supposed to just listen. And if we could just acknowledge that and be there with that, I think that could be something that could start to shift it all. So let me know what questions you might have. Put them in the chats. Feel free. I hope to be able to get back to everybody. But I'm telling you, this is a game changer in regards to your own personal development, as well as your own relationships that you have. It could be something that could really shift so much in your own personal lives.